If you were the ruler of a wild land, what would you do when a stranger's gaze shook your throne? Are you curious about the power hidden behind those fiery eyes? Join me in exploring, my friend, to uncover this mystery. I am Caleb Harlan, though folks around Silver Creek call me Storm, a name I earned not from the skies, but from the way I've weathered the tempests life's thrown at me. I'm a cattleman, the richest in this godforsaken corner of the frontier, with a ranch sprawling across the plains like a kingdom carved from blood and sweat. My wealth's no secret. Silver veins I stumbled upon years ago made sure of that. But it's never shielded me from the cold truth of this land. Power here belongs to those who take it, and mercy's a luxury few can afford. That December day, as I stepped into the dusty trail saloon, I didn't know I was walking into a storm fiercer than any blizzard, one that'd rip open wounds I'd buried for 25 years and set me on a path where everything I'd built could burn to ash. Yo, before we dive in, smash that like button and drop a 1 in the comments if you're ready for a wild ride. Stick around for a twist that'll blow your mind. The wind howled outside, a merciless beast clawing at Silver Creek, turning the streets into a frozen wasteland. Snow piled high against the saloon's wooden walls, sneaking through cracks to chill the air inside. I pulled my hat low, the brim shadowing my eyes as I pushed through the swinging doors. The familiar reek of whiskey, sweat, and stale tobacco hit me like a fist, but it was the warmth from the potbelly stove in the corner that kept me from turning back into the storm. I'd come for a drink, maybe a moment's peace from the endless demands of the ranch, but what I found instead was a scene that sank its hooks into my heart and wouldn't let go. Behind the bar stood a young woman, her auburn hair tied back in a messy knot, strands falling loose like she hadn't the time or strength to care. Her name, I'd later learn, was Lila Carter, though that name was as much a mask as the one I wore. She moved with a quiet grace, pouring drinks for the roughnecks and drifters who filled the saloon. But her hands, Lord, those hands, shook like leaves in a gale. Not from fear, I could tell, but from the cold that seeped into her bones. Her dress, a thin, threadbare thing, was no match for the December chill that bled through the walls. Her lips were tinged blue, her cheeks pale as the snow outside, and between serving customers, she rubbed her arms, trying to coax life back into her fingers. I watched her, my chest tightening, as she reached for a glass and fumbled it. The crash echoed through the saloon like a gunshot, and every eye turned her way. Grady, the barrel-chested bartender, was on her in an instant, his voice booming across the room like thunder over the plains. "Damn it, Lila! That's the 3rd glass this week. You think I'm running a charity here?" His words were sharp, meant to cut, and I saw her shoulders tense, her head bowing as she knelt to gather the shards. The other patrons smirked or looked away, content to let her bear the humiliation alone. But I couldn't look away. There was something in the way she held herself, even as she crouched among the broken glass, something unbroken, a spark of defiance that refused to be snuffed out by the cold or Grady's cruelty. It stirred something in me, something I hadn't felt in years, a rage against the injustice of it all, a need to shield that spark before it flickered out. I've seen suffering before. Hell, I've lived it. 25 years ago, I was Jacob Harlan, a boy of 10, hiding in a root cellar while my family's screams tore through the night. The men who came to our ranch in Redstone weren't Apache, no matter what the territorial prosecutor claimed. I've carried that scar, both the one on my neck and the one in my soul, every day since. I built my empire to bury that pain, to become untouchable. But seeing Lila there, shivering and shamed, cracked open a wound I thought had long since scarred over. I couldn't stand by, not when her suffering was so raw, so undeserved. I stepped toward the bar, my boots heavy on the creaking floorboards, and reached into my coat for the roll of bills I always carried. Money's never been a problem for me. It flows like water from the silver mines I own. I figured a few dollars could buy her a coat, maybe a hot meal, something to ease the misery etched into her face. But as I approached, her green eyes snapped up to meet mine, sharp and wary, despite the exhaustion weighing her down. Before I could open my mouth, she spoke, her voice hoarse from the cold but laced with a strength that hit me like a slap. "I don't need your charity, mister," she said, her words cutting through the saloon's din. "I've seen men like you before, rich, thinking your money can buy whatever you want, even a woman's dignity." Her accusation stung, not because it was true, but because it wasn't. I've never been the kind to flaunt my wealth or use it to bend others to my will, but her words made me see myself through her eyes, just another powerful man, looming over her like a vulture circling a wounded animal. "Lila, that's not what I meant," I said, keeping my voice low, steady, the way I'd calm a spooked horse. "I just saw you suffering, and I thought, you thought you could play the hero," she cut in, her eyes blazing now. "You think I haven't heard that before? Men like you always want something in return. Always." Her voice trembled, not from weakness, but from a fury that matched the storm outside. The saloon grew quieter, heads turning, whispers spreading. They knew who I was. Caleb Storm Harlan, the man who owned half this town, from the livery to the general store. But Lila didn't care. She stood there, shivering, her hands clenched into fists, daring me to prove her right. I tried to explain, to tell her I only wanted to help, that I wasn't like the men she'd known. But the more I spoke, the more her walls went up. She accused me of looking down on her, of thinking I was better than the folks scraping by in places like this. Each word was a lash, and I felt the weight of my wealth, my power, like a yoke I'd never noticed before. I wanted to tell her I knew what it was to be powerless, to lose everything, but the words stuck in my throat. How could I make her understand that I saw her not as a charity case, but as someone who reminded me of the boy I'd been, alone, fighting to survive in a world that didn't care? The whispers grew louder, and I caught fragments of my name, of Lila's, of rumors about why a man like me would bother with a barmaid. Grady, who'd been watching from across the room, sauntered over, his heavy steps shaking the floor. His face split into a smile that didn't reach his eyes, a smile I'd seen on too many men who knew how to play the game of power. "Mr. Harlan," he said, his tone dripping with false deference. "I'm sorry about Lila here. She's new. Don't know how to talk to important folks like yourself. I'll make sure she behaves." Lila's face went pale, and not just from the cold. Her eyes flicked between me and Grady, and I saw the fear there, raw and real. She was trapped, caught between a stranger offering help she didn't trust, and a boss who held her life in his meaty hands. I wanted to tell Grady to back off, to tell him I didn't need his groveling. But before I could, Lila's expression shifted. The defiance was still there, but it was tempered by something else. Resignation, maybe, or the weight of a choice she didn't want to make. I didn't know it then, but that moment was the spark that had set everything ablaze. Lila wasn't just a woman fighting to survive a brutal winter. She was a warrior in disguise, carrying secrets that could topple the corrupt empire that ran Silver Creek. And I, Caleb Harlan, the man who thought he'd seen it all, was about to learn that some fights aren't won with money or guns, but with the kind of courage that burns brighter than any storm. As the snow kept falling outside, I felt a fire kindling in my chest. A fire that'd either save us both or burn everything I'd built to the ground. The air in the dusty trail saloon hung heavy, thick with the stench of spilled whiskey and the weight of unspoken truths. Lila's words still echoed in my ears, her accusation that I was just another rich man looking to buy her dignity, cutting deeper than I'd expected. I stood there, my hand still hovering over the roll of bills in my coat, feeling the eyes of every drunk and drifter in the place boring into me. I'm Caleb Harlan, known as Storm, the man who turned silver into an empire. But in that moment, I felt like Jacob Harlan again, a scared boy hiding in the dark, powerless against the cruelty of the world. Lila's green eyes, sharp as a blade despite her trembling frame, held me fast, daring me to prove her wrong. I wanted to, more than anything, but the truth she was about to reveal would shake the foundations of everything I thought I knew. I leaned closer, keeping my voice low so the prying ears around us wouldn't catch it. "Lila, I ain't here to buy you or anyone else. I saw you suffering, and I can't stand by while someone's freezing in a place like this. Let me help. No strings." Her lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment, I thought she'd spit in my face. But then her shoulders sagged, just a fraction, and she glanced at Grady, who was still hovering nearby, his fake smile plastered on like bad paint. She motioned me to a corner table far from the bar, where the shadows swallowed the light from the oil lamps. I followed, my boots heavy on the creaking floor, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and something I couldn't name. Hope, maybe, that I could make a difference for once. We sat, the table sticky with spilled liquor, and Lila leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know what you're stepping into, Mr. Harlan. You think you're helping, but you're wading into a snake pit." Her words were urgent, laced with a fear that wasn't there before. "My name ain't Lila Carter. It's Elizabeth Morrow, and I didn't end up in Silver Creek by accident." My blood ran cold, not from the December chill seeping through the walls, but from the weight of her confession. I'd heard the name Morrow before, whispered in the saloons of Willow Bend, a town 3 days' ride from here. A lawyer named Morrow had been found dead 4 years ago, ruled a suicide, though the rumors said otherwise. I leaned closer, my hands gripping the edge of the table. 4 years ago, she continued, her eyes darting to the saloon doors as if expecting them to burst open. My father, James Morrow, was a lawyer in Willow Bend. He took on cases for folks who couldn't pay, people the law forgot. He found something, documents proving Tom Fawn Vernon Slade was stealing land, forging deeds and using fake debts to trap people. Slade runs Silver Creek, Mr. Harlan. He's got his hands in everything, land, mines, even the women working in places like this. Her voice cracked, but she pushed on. My father tried to expose him. He sent a letter to the territorial governor, but before it could reach anyone, he was dead. They said he shot himself, but I saw the body. There was no powder burn on his hands, no gun near him. Slade had him killed, and I ran. I felt a fire ignite in my chest, a rage I hadn't known since I was a boy. 25 years ago in Redstone, my family was slaughtered. My mom, my pa, my little sister, while I hid in a root cellar, clutching the scar on my neck where a knife had grazed me. The territorial prosecutor, a man whose name I'd buried deep, called it an Apache raid, but I'd always known it was a lie. The men who came that night wore boots, not moccasins, and their voices were cold, calculated. Lila's story was peeling back the scab on that wound, and I wasn't ready for what came next. I've been in Silver Creek 3 years. Lila said, her hands no longer shaking, her voice steady now. I came here to find proof, to finish what my father started. Slade uses contracts, debts that can't be paid, to trap women like me. He calls it alternative service, but it's slavery, plain and simple. I've been working in this saloon, watching, listening, gathering evidence. I've got papers hidden in a safe deposit box at the bank, financial records, forged deeds, statements from other women he's trapped. But I can't get them to anyone who'll listen. Slade owns the courts, the sheriff, even the telegraph office. I sat back, my mind racing. The saloon's noise faded, the clink of glasses and drunken laughter drowned out by the thunder in my head. I'd built my life on the idea that money and power could keep me safe, that I'd never be that helpless boy again. But Lila, Elizabeth, was showing me a world where my wealth meant nothing against a man like Slade. And then she said something that stopped my heart cold. There's more, Mr. Harlan. I found something about you. Your real name ain't Caleb, is it? It's Jacob Harlan from Redstone, 1851. Your family wasn't killed by Apaches. Slade was the prosecutor who covered it up. He was paid to make it look like a raid, but it was about your father's land, silver deposits he wouldn't sell. The room spun. I gripped the table to keep from falling, my scar burning under my collar. I'd spent 25 years believing I'd survived by chance, that the men who killed my family were long gone. But Lila had a letter, yellowed and creased, tucked inside her dress. She slid it across the table and I recognized my father's handwriting instantly, the same slanted script he'd used to teach me my letters. It was addressed to the territorial governor, dated 3 days before the massacre, detailing Slade's early schemes, bribes, land theft, murders disguised as accidents. My father had been a rancher like me, but he'd seen through Slade's lies and paid the ultimate price. I wanted to scream, to tear the saloon apart, to ride to Slade's courthouse and put a bullet in him right then. But Lila's hand on my wrist stopped me, her touch firm, grounding. You can't go after him alone, she said. He's got men everywhere, watching, waiting. If you try to help me, you're in as deep as I am. Her eyes held mine, and I saw not just fear, but a fire that matched my own, a determination to see this through, no matter the cost. I'd come into this saloon looking to buy a coat for a shivering girl, but now I was staring down a truth that could destroy everything I'd built. Slade wasn't just Lila's enemy, he was mine, and he'd been so for 25 years. The weight of that letter, of Lila's secrets, settled on me like a yoke. I wasn't just Caleb Harlan anymore, the cattleman who owned half of Silver Creek. I was Jacob Harlan, the boy who'd lost everything, and the man who might finally have a chance to set it right. But as we sat there, the saloon doors creaked, and I knew the storm was about to break wide open. Hold on tight, because the secrets Lila's about to spill will turn Caleb's world upside down and set Silver Creek ablaze. The saloon doors swung open, letting in a gust of icy wind and 3 men cloaked in snow-dusted coats. My hand instinctively drifted to the Colt at my hip, the weight of it a familiar comfort. I'm Caleb Harlan, stormed to those who know me, but in that moment, I was Jacob Harlan again, the boy who'd learned to trust his instincts when danger walked in. The men didn't bother shaking off the snow. They strode straight for the bar, their eyes locking on Lila and me. The tallest, a wiry man with a scar slicing down his cheek, had a grin that made my blood boil. I recognized that scar, that voice from a night 25 years ago in Redstone, when my world burned. He was one of Slade's men then, and he was Slade's man now. "Mr. Harlan," the scarred man said, his voice smooth as oil but sharp as a razor. "Judge Slade's heard about your interest in our little barmaid here. He wants to remind you that some arrangements in Silver Creek are set in stone. Debts, you see, gotta be paid." He glanced at Lila, his smile twisting into something predatory. "She knows what kind of debt I mean." Lila's hands shook, not from cold this time, but from a fear so raw it hit me like a punch. Her eyes darted to me, pleading, but not for help, for me to stay calm. I wanted to lunge at the scarred man, to wipe that grin off his face, but Lila's warning from moments ago echoed in my head. Slade's men were everywhere. I forced my voice to stay even, though it burned to do it. "What kind of debt we talking about?" I asked, leaning forward, my hands flat on the table to keep them from my gun. The scarred man pulled a folded paper from his coat, yellowed and stamped with official seals. He unfolded it with deliberate slowness, letting the saloon's dim light catch the ink. "Miss Carter, or should I say Miss Morrow, owes the judge $600 for legal services plus interest. 4 years at his rates, that's near $2,500 now." He pointed to a clause in fine print. "If she can't pay in cash, there's other ways to settle. Personal ways, if you catch my drift." My vision went red. I've faced rustlers, outlaws, and stampedes, but nothing had ever made me want to kill like that moment. Lila's voice, barely a whisper, cut through my rage. "Slade helped me when I came to Silver Creek, running from Willow Bend. I was desperate, alone. He said it was free, but then came the contract. I didn't know what I was signing until it was too late." Her words were a confession, a wound laid bare, and I saw the truth. Slade wasn't just a crook. He was a predator, using the law to cage women like Lila. I stood, my chair scraping the floor, and reached for my money. "I'll pay it," I said, my voice like gravel. "All of it, right now." The scarred man's smile widened, and I hated him for it. "You can pay the money, Harlan, but the other part of the deal, that's personal. Miss Morrow's already started fulfilling it, and the judge don't like his arrangements." Interrupted. The saloon went quiet, even the piano player stopping mid-note. I saw it then, in the faces of the other women working the tables. Haunted eyes, careful movements, like animals expecting a whip. Slade's corruption wasn't just Lila. It was a web, trapping anyone too weak to fight back. I stepped forward, putting myself between Lila and the scarred man, my body a wall against his threat. "Tell Slade I'll be at his courthouse tonight," I said, my voice low, deadly. "We'll settle this." The scarred man chuckled, folding the contract back into his coat. "The judge'll be pleased to hear it. Don't be late, Harlan. Defiance ain't taken kindly in Silver Creek." They turned and left, the doors swinging shut behind them, but the chill they left wasn't from the snow. I looked at Lila, expecting fear, but her eyes were calculating, like she was measuring me, deciding if I was worth the risk. She pulled me back to the corner table. "If you're going to face Slade, you need to know everything," she whispered. "He's not just after me. He's after you too. That letter from your father. It wasn't just about land. He found proof Slade was working with a syndicate, stealing claims across the territory. Your family died because they wouldn't sell." Her words were a knife, twisting in the scar I'd carried since Redstone. I wanted to believe she was wrong, but the truth was in her eyes, in the letter she'd shown me. Slade had killed my family, and now he was coming for me. Grady appeared then, carrying a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses, his smile too wide, his hands shaking. "On the house, Mr. Harlan," he said, setting the glasses down. I lifted one, but Lila's hand shot out, knocking it from my grip. The whiskey splashed across the table, and in the amber liquid, I saw white crystals glinting. Arsenic, the kind I'd seen used in mining camps to silence rivals. Grady's face went pale, his excuses tumbling out. "Just sugar, I swear. I was trying to make it special." But I knew better. I grabbed him by the collar, my voice a growl. "How long you been Slade's dog, Grady? How many others you poisoned for him?" He stammered, swearing it was the first time that Slade had him by the throat over some old debt. Lila drew a small derringer from her dress, her voice ice cold. "Fear ain't an excuse for murder, Grady. Pick a side now." The saloon was chaos now, some patrons fleeing, others watching like vultures. I saw 3 figures outside the window, Slade's men, waiting for me to stumble out, weakened by poison. Lila grabbed my arm, pulling me toward a door marked "Private." "We need to move," she said, her voice urgent. "There's a way out, but it's dangerous." We slipped through the door into a narrow staircase leading to a basement, the air damp and heavy with the smell of earth. Lila explained that the saloon sat atop old mining tunnels, relics of the silver boom. She moved with purpose, leading me through a maze of passages, her derringer still in hand. I drew my Colt, the weight of it steadying my nerves, but the sound of boots behind us, Grady and others, told me we were far from safe. My heart pounded not just with fear, but with a fury that had been simmering for 25 years. Slade had taken my family, and now he was after Lila. I'd be damned if I let him win again. The tunnel was a coffin of stone and shadow, the air thick with dust that stung my lungs. "I'm Caleb Harlan, storm to the folks of Silver Creek." But as I followed Lila through the twisting passages beneath the town, I was Jacob Harlan, the boy who'd crawled out of a root cellar to find his world in ashes. My Colt was heavy in my hand, the portfolio of evidence Lila had given me tucked inside my coat, its weight a reminder of the stakes. We'd escaped the saloon, but Slade's men were closing in, their boots echoing behind us like the drums of a war I'd been fighting since Redstone 25 years ago. Lila moved ahead, her steps sure despite the dim light, her derringer glinting as she checked its 2 shots. We were running out of time, and I could feel the noose tightening. We reached a fork in the tunnel, and Lila hesitated, her breath catching. "Left goes to the general store," she whispered. "But it's longer, more connections. Right goes to the bank where my evidence is, but it's a dead end if they trap us." The voices behind us grew louder, Slade's men calling out, narrowing their search. I made the call. "Bank," I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my gut. If we were going to make a stand, I wanted Lila's evidence, her years of work to expose Slade, in our hands. If we didn't make it, maybe someone else would find it. The tunnel to the bank was narrower, the walls pressing in like they meant to crush us. We reached a heavy wooden door, and Lila produced a worn key, her hands steady now, like she'd been preparing for this moment her whole life. We slipped into the bank's basement, surrounded by filing cabinets and strongboxes, the sounds of the main floor above us, clerks counting coins, customers chatting, mocking our desperation. Lila led me to the safe deposit box area, a small room lined with metal compartments. Box 47 was tucked behind a beam, and as she opened it, I positioned myself to watch the basement entrance and the stairs. Inside was a leather portfolio stuffed with documents, forged deeds, financial records, statements from women like Lila, all proof of Slade's empire of corruption. And at the bottom, a letter from my father, written days before Redstone burned, begging the governor to investigate Slade's crimes. Footsteps echoed on the basement stairs. Slade's men had found us. Lila stuffed the portfolio into my coat, her eyes fierce. "There's one more tunnel," she said, pointing to a false wall. "It leads to the church, then the edge of town." But before we could move, voices came from the main floor. Slade himself was here, ordering the bank locked down. "No one in, no one out," he barked, his voice carrying the cold authority of a man who'd never been crossed. We were trapped. Basement blocked, main floor sealed, and time running out. Lila's face hardened, and she made a choice that tore at me. "Take the portfolio and go," she said. "I'll stay, make a distraction." This was always about getting the evidence out. I grabbed her arm, my voice rough with emotion. "We're in this together, Elizabeth. I ain't leaving you to face Slade alone." She smiled, a sad, knowing smile, and told me she'd already sent copies of the documents to a federal marshal in Cheyenne. If she died, those papers would reach the territorial authorities. She'd planned for this, played the helpless barmaid to get close to Slade, but I saw her now, Elizabeth Morrow, a strategist who'd spent 4 years setting a trap. We slipped through the false wall into a tunnel barely wide enough for one, The portfolio pressed against my chest, a ticking bomb of truth. But 50 feet in, Lila stopped, her hand raised. Voices ahead, Slade's men at the church exit. He'd anticipated every move, turned the tunnels into a trap. My heart pounded, rage and fear mixing like whiskey and gunpowder. Slade had killed my family, trapped Lila, and now he had us cornered. But Lila had one last card. "There's a shaft," she whispered, pointing up. "Old ventilation from the mines. It's risky, but they won't expect it." We climbed, testing rusted rungs embedded in the stone, the portfolio a dead weight in my coat. Below, Slade's voice echoed, chilling me to the bone. "Jacob Harlan," he called, his tone mocking. "I knew you'd come back. Your father was a fool thinking he could fight me. Redstone was a lesson, and tonight I'll finish it." He knew who I was, had known all along, waiting for the boy from Redstone to resurface. My hands shook, not from fear, but from a rage I'd buried for decades. We reached the top, emerging in an abandoned mining shack on the edge of town, snow visible through gaps in the walls. But we weren't safe. Voices outside, more of Slade's men, and the sound of boots climbing the shaft below. I told Lila to run, to take the portfolio and get to Cheyenne. "I'll hold them off," I said, my Colt ready, but she refused, her eyes blazing. "We finish this together, Jacob. Slade doesn't get to win." The shack door burst open, and there he was, Vernon Slade, older than I'd imagined, his eyes cold as the winter night. The scarred man flanked him, along with two others, their guns drawn. Slade smiled, a predator's grin. 25 years ago, I thought you were dead, Jacob. Tonight, I'll make sure." I raised my Colt, my heart a furnace of grief and fury. Lila stood beside me, her derringer steady. We were outnumbered, outgunned, but we had something Slade didn't: truth and the will to see it through. The fight that followed was a blur of gunfire and blood, but when the smoke cleared, Slade's reign was over. The cost was high, too high, but the portfolio and Lila's courage ensured his empire would crumble. The mining shack was a ruin of splintered wood and blood, the air thick with gunpowder and the echo of screams. I'm Caleb Harlan, or I was. Storm to the people of Silver Creek. Jacob Harlan to the ghosts of Redstone. But as I stood over Vernon Slade's body, my Colt still smoking, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. Lila, Elizabeth Morrow, leaned against the wall, her derringer empty, a gash on her arm bleeding through her torn dress. The portfolio of evidence lay between us, its pages scattered but intact, a testament to her 4 years of defiance and my 25 years of buried pain. We'd won, but the cost was carved into our flesh and souls, and Silver Creek would never be the same. The fight had been brutal, over in minutes but feeling like a lifetime. Slade's men had come at us hard, the scarred man leading the charge. I'd taken him down first, my bullet finding the heart of the man who'd haunted my nightmares since Redstone. Slade had been last, his cold eyes widening as Lila's derringer barked, ending his reign of terror. We'd taken wounds, my shoulder burned where a bullet had grazed it, and Lila's arm needed a doctor. But we were alive, and Slade wasn't. The portfolio, with its damning proof of his crimes, was our salvation, and Lila's foresight in sending copies to Cheyenne meant the truth would outlive us, even if we hadn't made it. We stumbled out of the shack into the snow, the storm still raging but the world feeling quieter, like it was holding its breath. Silver Creek lay below, its lights flickering through the blizzard. A town built on corruption, but now teetering on the edge of change. I carried the portfolio, its weight heavier than any herd I'd driven, and Lila walked beside me, her strength a beacon in the dark. We made it to the church, where the tunnel would have led, and found a horse tied up, likely one of Slade's men's. We rode to my ranch, the only place I knew we'd be safe until the federal marshal arrived. The days that followed were a whirlwind. The marshal came, armed with Lila's documents and more from Cheyenne, where her copies had sparked an investigation. Slade's empire unraveled faster than I'd thought possible. His men turned on each other, his allies fled, and the women he'd trapped came forward, their voices finally heard. Silver Creek's courthouse, once Slade's throne, became a place of reckoning, with new judges and honest sheriffs stepping in to clean up the mess. I watched it all from my ranch, my shoulder healing, but my heart still raw. I'd spent 25 years building walls around Jacob Harlan, thinking Caleb Storm Harlan could outrun the past. But Lila had shown me that justice wasn't about running. It was about facing the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Lila, or Elizabeth Morrow, as she was known now, didn't stay in the shadows. She took her father's place, not as a victim, but as a prosecutor, her voice ringing in the courtroom as she fought for the women Slade had broken and the families he'd destroyed. I saw her in town one day, her auburn hair tied back, her eyes still sharp but softened by something new, hope, maybe, or the knowledge that she'd kept her promise to her father. She'd changed Silver Creek, and she'd changed me. I wasn't the same man who'd walked into the dusty trail saloon, thinking a few dollars could fix a broken world. I was Jacob Harlan, survivor of Redstone, and I'd found a purpose beyond wealth or power, to honor the family I'd lost by making sure no one else suffered like they did. The ranch felt different now, quieter, like it was waiting for me to decide who I'd be next. I kept the letter from my father, framed above my desk, a reminder of the man who'd tried to stand against Slade and paid with his life. Silver Creek was healing, new businesses opening, honest leaders emerging, the weight of Slade's corruption lifting like the snow melting in spring. But I knew the scars would remain, for me, for Lila, for the town. Justice had come, but it had taken everything, my illusions, my safety, and nearly our lives. I stood on my porch one evening, the stars clear above the plains, and thought about Lila's words in the saloon, her accusation that I thought money could fix everything. She'd been wrong about me, but she'd been right about one thing. Some debts can't be paid with coin. They're paid with courage, with truth, with the willingness to stand in the storm and not break. I'd done that, and so had she. Silver Creek was reborn, and so was I. Jacob Harlan wasn't just a name from a past I'd buried. It was the man I'd become, the man who'd fought for justice and won, even if the victory left me bruised and changed forever. The snow buried Silver Creek's sins, but as I stood on my porch, Jacob Harlan once more, I knew the fight for justice had carved my name into this land's soul forever. Smash that like button if you felt the weight of that truth, and drop a 1 in the comments to honor the fire we kindled.